All right, welcome to the May 11th episode of Tougies Take, the world's number 19 hockey podcast.
I'd take number 19 if that was true.
Tougie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, buddy. We got a lot to talk about. It's been a fun time doing this podcast this year, and it's about to get better because the playoffs are almost here. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. So I'm excited. I'm doing well. How about you, buddy?
Talking Ploffs. Excellent.
I think we have an episode title already.
I rode my bike today. Talking Ploffs.
Talking
Write
Ploffs.
that down. We'll add it to the.
We come up with about.
I always have a page in my notebook, handy dandy notebook. I always have a page where I put down all of the episode titles. I call it the Cloud of Possibilities. It'll catch on.
So you were riding your bike.
I hope. Anyway, all right, so let's yeah, well, I did. So, let's not pull a muscle. Let's hit some warmies.
Let's hit some warmies.
So I got 5 questions for you.
I like this segment, by the way. This is a fun addition, so I'm excited for this too.
It's one of my better ideas. It's right up there with the time I realized that you can have 2 couches face each other to make like a huge pit and you can watch TV on that. Can't believe I didn't get into engineering school. Anyway, 511 warmies. So all these have a theme today, and today's theme is going to go along with your favorite hobby, which is jersey collecting.
All right. I'm intrigued.
So we'll start with the first one. Which player in the NHL do you think will lead jersey sales next year?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good one. Just because, like, the number one pick out of the, I don't even know if Lafreniere would have been top 3 for this year. So I don't think like anybody coming out of the draft would make a difference. I don't believe there's a player on like a Kaprizov type of hype train who's going to be coming over next year either. I mean, I feel like McDavid's the obvious shout. Just because, like I said, I can't think of any top rookies. I can't think of any like long-awaited prospects that are finally going to make the jump. So you have to look towards the most popular players in the league. So I think it would have to be McDavid. Unless like Sidney Crosby or Alex Ovechkin were to randomly announce, like, I'm done and I'm leaving after the season. So I'm going to go with McDavid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think McDavid's right. I think ESPN is going to see the fatal mistake that NBC has made and not been like, look at this guy, watch him play. It's entertaining.
That was talked about on Reddit.
He's going to score 3 goals even if they lose.
Pretty much. Well, that's the thing that was talked about on Reddit in the past couple of days. Just in general, a horrible job like the NHL has done in marketing Connor McDavid as this generational phenom. And they have done a horrible job of it. Like, think about how much mainstream sports coverage McDavid got for hitting 100 points, which of course we're going to talk about a lot today. It was practically nothing. So yeah, hopefully, and that's my thought, and was kind of my response to that thread that I saw, and I'm sure a lot of you saw it too. But the idea of hopefully, granted, ESPN isn't this cultural cornerstone that it once was, but hopefully with their backing, they do a better job of promoting the stars of the sport, like Connor McDavid and Tom Wilson, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I heard more about that roided up horse than I did Connor McDavid hitting 100 points.
Right.
So hopefully they'll get there. All right. So question 2. Who will be wearing a different jersey next year? Will it be Eichel, Laine, both, or neither?
Now there are things to talk about with both, although I will say with the Eichel stuff, it's a lot more concrete for the statements that he's made in the past 24 to 48 hours. There was some stuff out there about Patrick Laine, but in responses I saw from Finns, they were saying it looks like a lot is lost in translation. So on this show, I'm not going to put too much stock into the Patrick Laine statements that are out there. But I've said it too. if Columbus loses Laine, which granted he's an RFA, like they are screwed as an organization. Screwed. So not to say that Buffalo isn't. So I think for both, I don't see either moving. I don't. If I had to say one was more likely to move than the other, I would say it was Eichel, just because of what a disaster that situation is. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, a bit more in depth. I just think Columbus is in a situation right now where Patrick Laine has a decent amount of power. I think, we know that Tortorella's gone. And I guess, we can mention that here because, let's be honest, there's really not that much to talk about when it comes to Columbus. We've talked about Tortorella all season long. It's been made official that he's out. No surprise. That's pretty much the end of it, right? In terms of who Columbus is going to look for next, like I said, I think Patrick Laine has quite a bit of power here. Because if you're Jarmo Kekalainen, you can't afford to lose another star player. And, if you take Patrick Laine at his word that, I love playing here, you build this team around Patrick Laine and you get a coach that is willing to accept Patrick Laine for his faults. He's not going to be this incredible two-way physical power forward all the time. Accept Patrick Laine for what he is, utilize him to the best of his abilities, let him play Fortnite, and hopefully win hockey games. So I'm going to say I'm going to say both stay. I think Laine is more likely to stay than Eichel at this stage because with the comments Eichel's made, you have to wonder how willing. And you know what? I mean, I guess we might as well talk about it now instead of like an awkward transition later on. So we're gonna interject on the Warmies conversation here, Deej. We'll get back to it. But with the Jack Eichel stuff, and the reason why I'm sitting here saying, for those who don't know, that I feel like, depending on Sabres ownership, how happy the Pagulas are that their star hockey player is saying this stuff. This is from Greg Wyshynski from Jack Eichel. I've been a bit upset about the way things have been handled since I've been hurt. There's been a bit of a disconnect between myself and the organization. The most important thing now is to get healthy and to be ready to play hockey next year, wherever that might be. Which, if that's not throwing down the gauntlet, I don't know what is. Another quote, and this is again from Greg Wyshynski, Jack Eichel saying, "Listen, my number one interest is Jack Eichel." You know what I mean? There was another quote out there as well. Jack Eichel essentially says the Sabres wouldn't let him have surgery on the herniated disc in his neck. His body, his choice. Eichel says, "It doesn't work like that. I wish. I'm under contract with this team, and they definitely hold a lot of cards on what I can and can't do." Eichel also confirmed that he fractured a rib shooting in a drill at Harbor Center before the season, which is where we all thought he got hurt. He confirmed he got hurt there. That initial report was out there weeks ago. Eichel said he played through an abdominal injury. So, as if it wasn't bad enough with I guess the rumors surrounding Jack Eichel, especially because you had former head coach Ralph Krueger saying, "Nah, he's not hurt." And then, of course, within a week or even a couple of days, it was, "No, Jack Eichel's hurt. He's not playing." And then, of course, it ended up being he's sitting out for the season. You just have to wonder where this is going to go. Like I said, the Laine thing, I think it's more likely he's an RFA. Get a coach that's going to work with him. Columbus needs to hold on to their star. Has this bridge been burnt? Is this an irreparable situation in Buffalo with Jack Eichel? Now, obviously, if the Sabres lose Jack Eichel, they're in a lot of trouble too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they're not. Especially, too, when you have someone like Sam Reinhart also voicing his displeasure with the team right now and saying, "Look, I'm a UFA at the end of next year. I don't know what my future brings." You now have this situation with the Sabres where there's all the stuff about a lack of a scouting department. And now you have these questions about the medical staff. What is the point of letting Jack Eichel play injured? And we'll be talking about certain players who are going to be playing injured heading into the playoffs. There's a few notable ones, one in particular that really stands out. I genuinely don't know if Jack Eichel comes back next year. I'm going to say he is, just because that's a really large contract. and devastating to the Sabres if they do move on from him. Like, just the optics of how things have gone with Jack Eichel, and if you move him, what that means. I mean, I talked about Columbus being screwed if you move on from Patrick Laine. I mean, Buffalo is already seemingly damned if you do, damned if you don't. So, Deej, hell of a question there in terms of who stays. I think both do. If I had to bet on one leaving, I'd say Eichel's more likely to leave at this point because that situation is screwed up beyond belief at this stage.
Yeah, I think he might lead the KHL in jersey sales next year. So this next question is purely a guess. There's no way to get the correct answer.
Okay.
So a lot of people might not know this, but the reverse retro program officially ends with the regular season. The reverse retro jerseys will be retired. However, if NHL teams so choose, they will be allowed to adopt their reverse retro as an alternate. Between 0 and 31, how many teams do you think keep their reverse retro?
God, that's tough because, I mean, for me right now, like, as a fan, I want to think of it as whose reverse retro is actually good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be gone. Oh, boy. That's a tough one. Now, I guess just to breeze through them, I could see Anaheim keeping theirs. I could see Arizona. I could see Boston. Like, it's almost easier to say who I don't think would keep theirs. And I mean, even like, I'm sorry, Blue Jackets fans, but I do think your reverse retro is hideous. Honestly,
yeah,
it's tough because you have to sit there and think of like, okay, what alternate jerseys are already out there, right? And are they better than the reverse retros? The only teams, it pretty much does coincide with this. The teams that I could see saying no thank you. Dallas, Detroit, because they're terrible. I don't think Montreal will keep their blue alternate, but maybe they will. I don't know if fans have kind of had that grow on them a little bit. I think you could get rid of the Rangers. You know, I think there's a better way to bring that back, but a lot of Rangers fans like it apparently. I could honestly see as at least half. I could, and even Vegas with the red. I'm going to say at least half of the teams, if not closer to 20 teams, could keep this as an alternate moving forward. I definitely have to, you know, you're right in that there's no way in getting the right answer, but you know, just trying to think immediately over, okay, who has a reverse retro, who already has an alt, how does that alternate stack up to that reverse retro, and how I think I've heard the fan bases talk positively and negatively about those. That's very tough and almost impossible to do on the fly. But I'll just say I do think that a good amount of teams will keep their reverse retros now moving forward as an alternate.
Right on. Okay. So this next question it's going to be a yes or no.
Okay.
We talked about him last week very briefly. Now that Tim Tebow is officially back in the NFL, does he crack top 10 in NFL jersey sales?
Okay, so here's the thing. First and foremost, I was wrong. I said, no, come on. The Tim Tebow thing is not going to happen. It's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Tebow is back in the NFL. It's been over 3,000 days since he last appeared in an NFL game. And now he's back in the league with Jacksonville as a tight end, not a quarterback. To answer your question, yes, Tim Tebow is absolutely top 10 in jersey sales. I think Tim Tebow will be top 5 in jersey sales. I'm not even being sarcastic. I think you look top 5 in jersey sales this year, it'll be Trevor Lawrence, it'll be Justin Fields, it'll be probably Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Tim Tebow. Those are my top 5 in jersey sales.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I don't think you're that far off. Okay, so final question. This one's also a little ambiguous. So last year, even in spite of the pandemic, we saw logo redesign, or we saw complete rebrands, not complete rebrands, but rebrands from Ottawa and Calgary.
Mm-hmm.
Do we
Ottawa
see
and Calgary?
Any logo redesigns?
Calgary did change their jersey. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they went back to the 1970s Larry McDonald styles.
DJ,
do we see any logo redesigns for next year?
You're going to get roasted for that.
I said, wait, Lanny McDonald?
You said Larry. At least you know the mistake you made instead of it being like, oh, wait, what? What did I do? What did I say?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good old Lanny, don't call me Larry McDonald.
It's fine. They don't have the internet. They don't have the internet in northern Alberta. I can't stress that enough.
I think they have other things to worry about in Alberta right now, so it's fine.
Yeah, like their telephone system. It's their only exchange of information. So do we see any logo redesigns next year? And if so, who is due for one?
Who is due for a logo redesign, huh? Oh, do we see any logo redesign? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. That said, who's due for a logo redesign? Number one, I'm surprised Washington uses the word mark, like the stick logo. I'm surprised they use that over like the eagle shaped like the Capitol. I'm surprised that's not their main logo. I will say though, if there's one team that I could look at to say, hey, two teams come to mind that I think have had better logos. I think the Arizona Coyotes need to switch off of the coyote head and go back to the logo that's on the Kachina. And I think the Florida Panthers need to go back to that logo that is on your hat right there, sir. And everyone knows what logo I'm talking about in case you're not watching this podcast in video form. The Panthers have had a better logo. I don't mind the logo they've had now for the past 5 years or so. Call it a soccer badge if you want to. But I do think now enough time has passed. I would personally revert back to the old logo. But that said, you know, it's not bad regardless with either team. But yeah, personally, I'd make those two changes.
Right on. All right, so that does it for the warm-ups. So today I mentioned I was riding my bike. I know I've been talking about how I've taken up beer league hockey. And so, you know, if you wanted to participate, so I'm playing, I'm a Floridian, I'm playing beer league hockey. So if you wanted to participate in a Floridian sport as a Northerner and try it on for size, I'd recommend getting on your bike, driving around the neighborhood, and looking at whose TV boxes are near big pickup. So you can see, you know, which houses to rob. And when you rob those houses, you're not going to want to leave any DNA evidence behind. And how are you going to do that?
How are you going to do that, Deej?
Well, you know, I would use the Lawnmower V4.0 from our lovely sponsors 4.0 at Manscaped.
Oh, God.
You can use code Tougie, that's TOUGIE, for 20% off. The Lawnmower 4.0, experience what it's like to go fast. You can complete your Michael Phelps cosplay from the waist down. You can treat your pelvis like the Amazon rainforest. That's right, completely smooth and ready for people to move on top of it. The Lawnmower V4.0. I use it personally. It's fantastic. Get yourself one. Code Tougie, TOUGIE, at manscaped.com for 20% off. And free worldwide shipping, of course. Not just free shipping within North America, worldwide. Join the over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Pick up the Lawnmower 4.0. Pick up anything else you want to. But check out code Tougie for, again, 20% off. That free worldwide shipping. And we thank Manscaped for sponsoring this show. Unlock your confidence. Always use the right tools for the job.
Indeed. I'll let you say it because I know it's your favorite tagline. Manscaped.
Your balls will thank you. Go ahead, check it out. Order one during the intro. We'll see you on the other side.
This is the intro now.
All right, and we're back. You've heard enough from us. It's time we heard from you. That's right. It's my mom's favorite segment of the show, the viewer questions. Tougie, why don't you hit us with some?
I shall. We will start things off here with my buddy from Twitter. It is one Crackshot. That's twitch.tv/CrackShotTV. Actually, yeah, Crackshot TV. There you go. On Twitch. Is it just me, or are the Avs going to be an absolute wagon for years to come? They need to win first. They need to win. If your definition of a wagon is a team that's consistently good, then yes. If your definition of a wagon is something that has four wheels and gets you places, well, I mean, the place you want to be, unless you want to die of dysentery along the way, is, celebrating in a Stanley Cup parade. So, yeah, no, Colorado's going to be great for years to come for sure, unless Joe Sakic, his voodoo spell wears off and he reverts back to the horrible GM everyone thought he was 5 years ago. Yeah, they're going to be great. But do you remember? I mean, I guess you do. I guess you do remember the great teams that didn't win, but you probably don't want to be remembered that way. So, good odds of winning a cup. They could be Stanley Cup champions within the next couple of months here. We'll see how it all plays out. DH Colorado, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think they've got the foundation. They've got Rantanen, they got McKinnon, they got Landeskog, they got Cale Makar. Grubauer is playing great, but can he sustain it? Is the question when you say for years to come. And I don't know. I mean, he's looked great ever since he left Washington. So we'll see. I think they have what it takes.
Very, very true. Next up from, who would have guessed it, a Habs_fan. If Price is healthy for the playoffs, do you think Allen or Price starts for Montreal? Deej, what do you think? Because I think the answer is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. So I think they start. I think they start Price, but because we're asking the question, if Price is healthy for the playoffs, I think they start Allen regardless. I don't think you throw in a goalie that's not 100% unless you're in desperation mode.
Agreed with that. And at the end of the day, it does come down to the fact that, and actually, I'm intrigued to get your opinion here, because if Gary Price is healthy, he's a $10 million goalie, he has to play. Otherwise, you cannot justify having that contract on your books. For Florida, we'll obviously talk about the playoff preview here with the Panthers. Sergei Bobrovsky has to be the starter, right? He's making $10 million. You have Drieger, you have Spencer Knight. It has to be Bobrovsky until it isn't, though, right?
I think you let the general manager worry about the contracts, and the coach just puts the best goalie in, whether that's Drieger, Bob, or Knight. It's been Drieger down the stretch here. So I don't know. I think you put in the best goalie because you want to win. So you put your best players on the ice.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, I think if we lived in a world where common sense prevailed, that's probably how it would be done most of the time. But I don't know. Because I don't know. I feel like some GMs would say, well, no, my reputation's on the line if you don't play this $10 million goalie. So you're playing this $10 million goalie. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, no, if Price is healthy, he ends up playing for sure. All right. Next up then. We'll run for it. We'll go for it. This is from Nico Edmonton. From Edmonton, Alabama. Are you a fan of fantasy hockey? DeJ, are you a fan of fantasy?
Do I play it? Yes. Do I like the way it makes me feel? No.
I think that's the answer for most people. Unless
I don't care what his Yahoo X rank is. You don't draft Frederik Andersen 3 years in a row because it burns you every time. It doesn't matter how many times I tell myself this. There's a run on goalies and he's sitting there and he gets the most starts, so I draft him and I shoot myself in the foot. So, fantasy hockey, a fickle mistress.
I'm a fan of fantasy sports, but I find myself partaking less and less every single year, just out of the time commitment to it. So many other things going on. But am I a fan? Yes. Am I currently playing at all? Well, DeJ, I am. And so can you, everybody, because DeJ has gone ahead and started up something that I am a very big fan of. Because as we have mentioned, it is playoff time, which means you, yes, you can sign up for the official Tougies Take Podcast Stanley Cup Playoff Bracket Challenge. The link will be on my Twitter, but it is bracketchallenge.nhl.com/leagues/10-832. That's 10-832. You can sign up for the official bracket challenge, which I don't know why you would, because I'm going to win. But at the end of the day, the Tougies Take Bracket Challenge is out there, and it is basically the only thing that I have done in terms of fantasy sports at all this year. So again, the Tougies Take Bracket Challenge. Sign up for that. And the winner will get something probably.
Yeah, we'll come up with something. Like maybe you'll win mod for a day. Or I don't know. Send you some orange juice. I don't know. We'll think of something.
Have some fresh a week ago Florida orange juice. Oh God! So
exactly.
Yeah, there we go. This next question is from Matthew. I'd love to see a take on goalies that disappointed and surprised you this season. So an interesting one, all things considered. In terms of, and DeJ, I'll give you a second to collect your thoughts here a little bit on this one. This question might have been sprung on you a little bit, but I mean, in terms of the goalies who surprised, I feel like it's pretty straightforward and a cop-out to say, hey, the rookies, because, my God, were the rookies phenomenal this year. I mean, again, you talk about Jeremy Swayman, who in 9 appearances has a .946 save percentage. That's a future Vezina winner, Jeremy Swayman. Even like Philip Gustafson in Ottawa appeared in 8 games. He has a .937. Alex Nedeljkovic, 23 games played, a .932. I mean, the young goalies absolutely took over this year. Man, even someone like Anthony Stolarz for an historically bad Anaheim team had a .926 in 8 games. Like, not that he's a younger goalie, but I mean, there's some guys out there. But like the big names that come to mind, Marc-Andre Fleury. I don't think anyone thought he was still this good. And Mike Smith. I think Mike Smith has that mantle. I mean, even over like a Michael Hutchinson or someone like that, Mike Smith carries that he's the flag bearer here for how the hell were you this good? You know, in a different year, I mean, he's probably top 5 in terms of like the Vezina conversation. You know, if you want to throw depending on what your limit is for games played, right? Because it's like you have Varlamov, you have Saros, you have Fleury, you have Vasilevsky and Smith all over 30 games. And then you have Nedeljkovic and Drieger at 23 each. So Mike Smith is in that conversation as a top 5 goalie this season, at least based off of save percentage. So that's absolutely absurd. And I never would have expected that. In terms of disappointing goalies, I mean, Freddie Anderson, just for how his season has gone. Sorry to bring it up again, Deej, and your fantasy hockey ventures. But Freddie Anderson definitely gets a shout as one of the most disappointing goalies this year. I don't, granted, it might not be completely his fault due to injuries, but still, nonetheless, the results are what they are, and they haven't been great to really say the least. Carter Hart is probably the other big name that really stands out for a what the hell happened to you type of season. So those are the big names for me that stand out on both sides of the coin.
Yeah. I would say that for me, the only goalie that both disappointed and surprised me this season was Carter Hart, who surprised me with his level of disappointment. And then on the other side of the coin, which goalies do I think overperformed? For me, that's going to be Alex Nedeljkovic and Chris Drieger.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how it couldn't be. I mean, those are both incredibly fair picks. We will move on. Again, we had actually quite a few questions this week, which I'm a big fan of here. Still got a lot coming up on the show. This is from Matt. Last week, you discussed whether or not Anze Kopitar is a Hall of Famer. But what about Nicholas Backstrom? And Deej, you might be surprised to know he's not talking about the goalie. He is talking about Washington Capitals forward Nick Backstrom and whether or not he is a Hockey Hall of Famer, a future Hockey Hall of Famer to you. And it's tough. I just don't know if he's the type of player that'll get there. And whether or not it's fair, I think he will often be seen as the Robin to Ovechkin's Batman, and ultimately that'll be held against him. And I mean, you are looking at a guy that next season will pass 1,000 points. I mean, there's a really good shout. Like he's what, an 87 birthday? So, I mean, the guy is going to be 34. Got a couple seasons left.
He's only 33. He's the same age as Kopitar.
It's a tough one. I mean, at the very least, he ends up in the conversation, which I think is great. But then you also look, and I think that one of those names that just keeps standing out, right, as whether or not he's a Hall of Famer or not, and we've had that conversation on the show, you look at Patrick Elias. Now, Patrick Elias, two-time Cup winner, former All-Star, finished with 1,000 points, 1,025 points actually to be exact here. So, I mean, Backstrom will pass him. He has a Stanley Cup to his name. There, the more I think about it, there's a pretty good shout here. And I think if Backstrom doesn't make it, he ends up towards the top of some people's list of the best to not be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. There's a legitimate conversation here already. I guess it depends on just how much more he plays. Again, at his age, I mean, obviously, too, I know he has that somewhat recent contract re-signing with the Caps. Does that, result in him staying and seeing out that contract? For the sake of the fun of it, I think I'm going to say yes. I think that's what I'm getting to. I think I talked myself into it. He has 4 years left on his deal after this. I think he's got a pretty good chance. I mean, especially, too, because I don't know if the Caps are going to slow down yet. So I'm going to say Nicholas Backstrom ends up making the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think he's done the work. Maybe he's been too quiet in doing the work. Could be the only thing against him.
Well, right, like that's what I'm saying. Is I feel like he's going to be viewed as being somewhat carried by Ovechkin. Whether or not that's fair or not, it's up to you. I don't think it is, but I think that could be used against him.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, was Yari Curry carried by Wayne Gretzky? I know it's not a direct comparison, but
I think some people say yes. Just the problem.
Yeah, well, Curry's in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, there you go.
So I guess Backstrom makes it.
I guess we have our answer. This next one is from Oilers and Leafs fans, so someone who's very, very confused, but trying to double up their chances in the North Division here. How much does Taylor Hall re-sign for in Boston, and for how long? Now, obviously, I was going to mention Taylor Hall a little bit later on, but he has been absolutely unreal. 2 goals against the New York Islanders last night, including the OT game winner. He has 8 goals now as a Bruin. 8. I believe he had 2 as a Sabre. He has been absolutely fantastic. The question, though, as to whether or not he gets re-signed, I don't know if I'm willing to bank on that. I mean, looking at it here, in terms of what the Bruins have coming up with contracts, David Krejci's 7.25 comes off the books. I love David Krejci. He has been one of the most underrated players in the NHL this season. He is 35, just turned 35 in April as well. He certainly won't be making $7 million, but the big question for Krejci is how much of a pay cut are you willing to take? Because I don't know if the Bruins could afford to pay Krejci $5 million, $4.5 million, and I think a team would absolutely be willing to give him that, and rightfully so. So you could say that Taylor Hall gets David Krejci money, which would be fine. I mean, I think for Hall, 6 or 7 has to be the limit. He's also 29 years old. So would Taylor Hall be willing to sign in Boston for 4 or 5 years at 6 or 7 million? I don't know. I've mentioned this before. I think the market could be back open on Taylor Hall. I think he could end up getting maybe not the over 10 million that was once discussed, but would I be surprised to see someone give him 8 million over 3 years? Probably not. So I'm not like, I wouldn't obviously be opposed to Taylor Hall playing this well, but the question is, how well would he play, with a different center? Because the big question for the Bruins right now is, who is your second line center next year? Because in theory, the game plan was Krejci goes and he's replaced by Charlie Coyle on the second line. But Charlie Coyle has had a pretty bad season for the Bruins this year. So I don't know if their plan is necessarily set up. Aside from Krejci and Hall to worry about, Andre Kasha's deal is up. That's $2.6 million off the books. There's no way he's coming back. He tried to play in his first game against the Islanders and he couldn't finish it. They also have to worry about Nick Ritchie, who, if they keep him, which they will, he's an RFA. He's making about 1.5 right now, I think, due to retention. He's going to be making like $3 million. Nick Ritchie's had a very good year this year. He was named the Bruins essentially their 6th player or 7th player of the year award, which is basically like, hey, you're the best that's not a star player. I mean, aside from that, Brandon Carlo as well, Mike Riley, if they wanted to re-sign him. And yeah, that's right. Both Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak's contracts are up this season as well. So the Bruins have one of the more interesting off seasons in my lifetime, I think, coming up with the decisions they have to make. I don't know if Taylor Hall comes back. If he does, like I said, he's 29. He's at that stage where he's going to want that David Krejci-like contract that brings him to age 35 or so. I think if you could say there's one thing Taylor Hall wants more than money at this point, is stability. going from Edmonton to New Jersey to Arizona to Buffalo to Boston. I can't imagine that guy wants anything more aside from like a cup, and obviously money's nice, but some stability for once in his career, essentially. We'll see. I'm not opposed to them bringing him back, but I can't imagine him getting more than $7 million a season from the Bruins, especially with their contract situation and just, albeit what could still be a risk to sign Taylor Hall for that much money.
Yeah, so this is really, if you go through the history of Hart Trophy winners, this is really the first time in the modern era a Hart Trophy winner has tested. I mean, aside from his signing with Buffalo in the offseason last year, this is really the first time a Hart Trophy winner, while still in their prime, has tested the UFA waters. I don't know. I think we see him get 3x7. And then, because if I'm Taylor Hall's agent, I'm thinking there's 2 huge contracts left in his career, and you try and get a short one here that pays you between 18 and 25 million. And then you sign a long-term deal with a team that needs your name recognition.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll see what happens there. 2 other quick questions here before we move on to essentially what is the rest of the show. Again, we are going to be doing essentially our end-of-season award predictions, because we might as well, and of course, we'll be getting into our playoff preview as well. This question, though, comes from one Jonathan Carton, and I picked this because it's the easiest question to answer. No disrespect, John. Which team in the past should have won a Stanley Cup but didn't? The Tampa Bay Lightning when they lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets. The end. Anything, Deej?
Yeah, reasonable answer.
I will also give a shout to the 2019 Boston Bruins, who lost Game 7 on home ice. You can't do that. Anyway, Deej.
I think there's so many different entry points into thinking about this question that it's difficult to answer. Like, is it based on their team composition? Is it based on them, like, how favored they were going to the playoffs? Like a lot of little questions like that. So I don't know. I would have loved to have seen, like, there was never a point where they were the best team in the league, but for some reason, I feel like Ottawa should have taken one home when they had that top line of Mikhailiuk, Spezza, and Alfredson. Those Ottawa years felt like they were coming to a head at some point, and then they just never got over the hurdle they needed. So I don't know. I don't really have a good answer here.
I will shout out the Sens fans as well that will rip you apart for the pronunciation of Milan Mahalik. But hey, there are some teams that have, fan bases that have time to make sure that you have proper pronunciation while other teams are in the playoffs, right, Dave?
Listen. So. Yeah, you know what I would do? If I was annoyed by that pronunciation, you know what I would do is I would go to audio engineering school. I'd make it my profession for 12 years. Then I would amass as much hockey knowledge as possible despite living in South Florida. And then I'd start my own podcast. That's what I'd do.
Yes, the feistiness continues. Our final question here. This is from Ender. I know this isn't related to the awards or playoffs, but between your dog and your girlfriend's cat, who would win in a race? So, for those who do not know, my girlfriend has a cat. His name is Willie, and he might as well be Garfield. I mean, dead ringer. My dog Emmy is a Jack Russell Whippet mix, which basically means she's a Jack Russell combined with a small greyhound, which are called Whippets for some reason. Not the Whippets you're thinking of. Which basically means she's a Jack Russell that's fast as fuck boy. So, for that particular meme. One of my biggest regrets in life is not training my dog to race. Because I think I could have made a killing at the track and then got sucked into the seedy underbelly of dog racing and probably been in prison by now. But what a ride that would have been. I would have been on top of the world, And then much like our second Kentucky, or not Kentucky Derby reference, but why not? Why not? Maybe I would have gotten into horse racing as well and pumped a horse full of steroids magically and just, I don't know how they got there, and it would have been fine. But my dog would win because she's so stupidly fast and agile. Teach the look on your face.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe you should have taught her to race, entered the seedy underbelly, won a few races, rigged some other ones, and then sell dog while you're on top.
God. Instead, what do? I take her for 3 to 4 walks a day and give in whenever she begs for treats because she's adorable. So, she's lived a happy, slightly overweight life.
Appreciating.
But, the return I'm going to get on the track now is slowly dwindling as she is ready to turn 8 in about a month. So we'll have the celebration. Deej, that was a pretty good round of viewer questions. Any parting thoughts on that before we move on to the real meat and potatoes of this particular episode of the Tougies Take podcast? Brought to you by Manscaped.
No. I'm excited to give out some awards. And some of them still to be decided. So I'm excited for our awards predictions. So I don't know. Yeah, let's get to it.
All right, let's do it. So again, we have done this throughout the entire season, our ongoing who do we think is going to win what award. As Deej mentioned, there are still some that could be decided, but for the most part, I think it's pretty much done and dusted, right? I think we know who's going to be winning what. So we will start off with the Hart Trophy, the MVP. It's a tough choice, but I think it's going to be made. Tom Wilson.
Yeah,
Deej, your choice.
I think he brings toughness and grit back to hockey, and there's guys in sports bars everywhere that are finally feeling vindicated for their bizarre opinions. So the Hart Trophy, I think there's no way you don't give it to McDavid. I think it's McDavid's. He should already start dusting the shelf off. However, I would like to answer this question from a perspective of, so if it doesn't go to McDavid by some miracle, who should it go to? And I don't hate Marc-Andre Fleury as a MVP for how he has backstopped the Golden Knights this year and how that team has been absolutely dominant.
I don't hate that either.
With Fleury being so consistent.
I don't think it would happen solely for the reason that
of course
the
not.
NHL really does seem alive. Well, yeah, but even in a sense of the idea of, will a goalie ever win the Hart Trophy again? I don't know if that's going to happen.
It was Hasek was the last one to win it, right?
Wasn't it? No, I think it was Jose Theodore in Montreal in 2003. And I'm going to double check this, but I'm 99% sure I'm right.
Yeah, he won it after Hasek. You're correct. Yeah, you are.
So, or actually 2002, I think is when he won it. I'm looking at it now. Forsberg won it in 2003. So fair enough. I was a little bit off on the year. But that said, I genuinely don't know if a goalie will ever win it again. I don't. Well, I mean, actually, no. Hey, you know what? We're completely wrong. You want to know why? Carey Price won it in 2015.
Why?
Somehow managed to forget that Carey Price won it in 2015. Just to piss off all the Habs fans. Carey Price did win it in 2015. So that said, though, I guess to that point,
I like how I just skipped over every time the Habs won it.
Yeah.
Just went straight for Hasek. I was like, ooh.
Oh, the bias, Deej. We're so biased. My God. That said,
I know. They're going to Jack Hughes us.
Yeah. Since 2000, 2 goalies have won it. Coincidentally, both from Montreal. I don't know. Like I said, if a goalie, like what you have to do, the level you have to play at is so astronomically high to be able to win this trophy as a goalie that it is just so much easier for them to give it to the league's top forward. A defenseman hasn't won it since Chris Pronger in 99-2000. Every other year it's gone to a forward. And I think we're going to continue along with that trend of this is essentially the top forward award. And yeah, don't worry, you'll get your revenant with, Norris or with the Vezina, but pretty much the MVP is almost exclusive to the league's top forward at that, for that season. So, I mean, in terms of what it takes for a goalie to get there, I don't disagree that someone like Marc-Andre Fleury, if it wasn't for Connor McDavid, would absolutely be in the voting this year. Like, there's no doubt about it. And honestly, I mean, he has maybe the best claim to it aside from McDavid. And to explain, I mean, in terms of points, obviously, Leon Draisaitl's second in the league behind McDavid. But then the argument becomes, well, where's Draisaitl if it wasn't for McDavid? And then third, you have Brad Marchand in points. I don't know if Brad Marchand would get the MVP over Marc-Andre Fleury. I love Brad Marchand. And, Mitch Marner's up there too. Patrick Kane's up there. But again, I think the fact he's not on a playoff team would prevent him from getting that award. I'm not saying that's right. That's how it is. Does Nathan McKinnon have a better shout than Brad Marchand? I don't think so. I'm in the argument, well, look who Marchand plays with. Look at who McKinnon plays with. They're both great players who also have great line mates. Like, that's not even, who cares? I mean, unless you wanted to go for a defenseman, which, compare Marc-Andre Fleury to, I mean, granted, Adam Fox not going to make the playoffs, but Adam Fox has, more than likely is going to finish here as the leading scorer amongst defensemen. I think you nailed it, though, that, like, if it wasn't for Connor McDavid, is it Marc-Andre Fleury's? And I think it could be, because I don't know if there's a defenseman that was that dominant. Again, Hedman, there's that conversation from an analytical perspective that he's not as good as, it appears at face value. Talk about Cale Makar, Dougie Hamilton. No, I think you're onto something there. That said, I guess just to bring it back around, like, yeah, Connor McDavid's going to win the Hart Trophy. But you're right. I think it's a very interesting conversation to say who would win it if he's not around and how certain other players would be viewed. How would Draisaitl be viewed? And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it for sure. But no, I mean, obviously, Connor McDavid's the guy to win that particular award this year.
Yeah. So our next award.
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of mentioned
touched on it briefly.
Go ahead.
So the Norris. The Norris. So I do want to mention something. I don't think that Adam Fox or Tyson Barrie end up with this award this year. However, Adam Fox's season is done. Tyson Barrie is only 1 point behind him, and he still has 2 games left to play. One against Montreal, one against Vancouver. So it is possible that Tyson Barrie ends up the winner of the defensive scoring race, which I find fascinating.
The modern day Paul Coffey. Coincidentally, playing on Edmonton. That said, in terms of who wins this, I mean, I would like to see it go to Adam Fox. Yeah, I think you look at the point production, the analytical standpoint, he has that over Barrie and over Hedman. Chris Letang, you can argue too. I mean, he's up there for points. He's very much in the conversation. Cale Makar, Jeff Petrie, Dougie Hamilton, Theodore Chikrin, who has 18 goals as a defenseman, which is just nuts. I mean, Darnell Nurse has 16, but had some high-scoring defensemen this year. Aaron Ekblad was on pace for the conversation. It really does depend on what you look at for the Norris. And I guess under what parameters you want to set it. How much do you care about points, the analytical standpoint? I still can't help but think that Victor Hedman's going to get this. Like I said, he wouldn't be my choice. Adam Fox would be my choice as the top defenseman in the NHL this season. But based off of reputation, the point production that's there, how strong Tampa's still been this season, I think it does go to Victor Hedman. But again, my choice would be Adam Fox.
Interesting. So, a few pieces of data that I'll say before I announce my pick. Something interesting where you mentioned Aaron Ekblad being on pace to enter the conversation. Did you know Mackenzie Weegar actually finished the season with a higher points per game played than Aaron Ekblad, which I find fascinating?
That honestly doesn't surprise me, though, because for whatever reason, I view Weegar as more offensively oriented than Ekblad.
Interesting. So I don't, but that's fair. I get it. I can see why you would think that. I think in a fair, just universe where we are legitimately evaluating the best defenseman in the NHL, this award should go to Shea Theodore. I think he was the best defenseman in the NHL this year. But because there really is no formula for them to award the Norris, and it's weird, it's all over the place, I think they end up giving it to who I believe was the second best defenseman in the NHL this year, and that's Dougie Hamilton.
I mean, I could see that based off of how strong of a team Carolina was this year. I could definitely see it. And I mean, I do rate Dougie Hamilton quite highly. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. And we've talked about this a lot this year, Deech. Like, in terms of the awards, there are going to be a lot of fan bases that are upset that their guy's not in it. Because there are legitimately 10 to 15 defensemen that I think you could say deserve to be named one of the top three. I mean, if not, maybe slightly more. Because you'll have guys that maybe didn't quite have the same point totals. Hell, even Thomas Chabot was pretty good for Ottawa this year, but like a Charlie McAvoy, Bruins bias, but Devon Taves, there have just been some damn good players this year. Brett Pesce in Carolina is another one where, again, he doesn't have the point totals, but very solid player. I mean, there are a lot of guys that could very well be in the conversation that simply aren't going to be. There's going to be a lot of frustrated fan bases as a result, but that just goes to show the standard that's been set by the top defensemen in this league. For as much as this league is oriented towards the offensive player, there are still some absolutely spectacular defensemen in the league right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that, then, shall we move on? All right.
Yeah. This next award, we're doing the Vezina next, I'd imagine.
Yes.
I have it down to 3 players, and I give one of them an edge, but maybe it's because I don't give out a fictional Vezina every year, but I can't remember a time where the Vezina was this close.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's another one of those awards where you're going to have some upset fan bases for sure. Because what are the parameters that one sets to dictate who's in the conversation? If you base it off of 30 games played, like I said, Varlamov is in there. UC Saros, Marc-Andre Fleury, Andre Vasilevsky, Mike Smith. Those are probably your top 5. And even then, that means Philip Grubauer is left out of the conversation. based off of, looking at goalies that have played at least 30 games and save percentages. So that shows you how ridiculous it is. But then again, if you want to throw in 23 games of Alex Nedeljkovic, 23 games of Chris Driedger, Jack Campbell's 21 games as well, there are a lot of fantastic goalies that are going to be left out of the top 3 finalists. So, DeJ, I'm intrigued to see what you think, because then you get into, I guess, the minutia of it, where it's like, okay, well, importance to team, because like with Nedeljkovic, you could say, oh, well, Peter Mrazek has also had spectacular numbers. He just got hurt. With Varlamov, you could say, oh, well, it's the system. Ilya Sorokin had good numbers too after shrugging off a rough start to his NHL tenure. He's a systems guy. Do you put more Vegas as well? You could say, oh, well, look at the team in front of him. Do you put more of an emphasis on UC Saros, who single-handedly, and this was one of the stats we were going to point out here, with Nashville, UC Saros almost single-handedly turned Nashville around. Through their first 28 games, they were 11-16-1. They had 23 points. UC Saros comes back from injury. They went 27-1 with 41 points and made the playoffs in the second half of their season. How much of an emphasis do you put there at that stage on what UC Saros did? So, DeJ, I'm intrigued to know, I guess, who would win this for you, but also like who would your top 3 be? Because like I said, defenseman of the year for the Norris, it's going to be a lot of upset fans, and maybe not as many, but still quite a few upset fans that their guy wasn't in this conversation.
So I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So if you subtract his games against Florida, because sometimes a team just has a goalie's number. Andrei Vasilevsky only lost 2 games all year. If you subtract his games against Florida, the Tampa Bay Lightning, whenever Curtis McElhinney or I believe Chris Gibson is their other backup, were in net, got absolutely destroyed. I think McElhinney stole 1 game at one point.
Yeah, McElhinney has the worst save percentage this season from a goalie who started at least 10 games. He had 12 starts, still won 4 out of 6. He won 4-6-2 this year. He had an .875 save percentage. So, like you mentioned, absolutely atrocious. And Chris Gibson, for that matter, started 2 games, and he had an .875 as well. So,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So, okay. So here's why Grubauer is not my top 3, because I feel like I owe this explanation to Colorado fans. When you take into account the Corsi scores of every single player on that Avs team, combined with when you actually look at it, there are 16 more goalies. There are 16 goalies above Grubauer in terms of how many shots were faced. Grubauer just did not face a lot of shots in the games that he played. That said, and I could make a similar argument for Fleury, but I'm not going to. I think it goes down to Fleury, Saros, and Vasilevsky. I have to give it to Vasilevsky, but if on awards night Saros walks away with this trophy, I will not be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I think my top 3 at this stage, like I said, I very much, embrace what the younger goalies did. My top 3, it has to be Saros, Fleury, and Vasilevsky. I think Varlamov was phenomenal this season. There's no denying that. But in terms of how I think the voting is going to go, Vasi and Fleury make it because they're on two of the best teams. And obviously, we're two of the best goalies. I think Saros gets in there over, at the end of the day, over Varlamov because of the expectations. Where the Islanders were pretty much guaranteed to make the playoffs for the vast majority of the season. Whereas for Nashville, it was pretty down to the wire onto whether or not they'd fend off that threat from Chicago and from Dallas especially. And I think in terms of the conversation, Saros gets in because of that. And again, because he's going to be viewed as there's no chance in hell Nashville makes the playoffs if Pekka Rinne is their guy. And, for Pekka Rinne too, I mean, I give him some credit. I'll shout him out here now. I mean, he got his 60th career shutout. He's now in sole possession of 19th all time, but he likely just played his last game as a member of the Preds, unless Saros goes down in the playoffs or is just absolutely abysmal. So I think my final three would be Saros, Fleury, and Vasi. I can't be upset if any of the three make it. Who would I personally give it to? I would go for Fleury. Number one, I'm not saying this is the right way to view it. Vasilevsky will win other Vezinas. This is probably Fleury's last shot. And I think he's deserving. And the fact that Fleury, again, is having one of the best old man seasons in NHL history, I have to give it to Marc-Andre Fleury because nobody thought, and I'm not saying, the award's not given for who you thought would be. Look, nobody thought Fleury would be this good. But that's what makes this run so special. You look back, and we've mentioned it quite a few times in the history of this podcast, you look back at the Alan Walsh Fleury getting stabbed in the back with a gigantic broadsword by Peter DeBoer meme. And everyone's like, cool, where's Fleury getting traded to? And he stays. And yes, it's a great team in front of him, but he's accomplished what he's accomplished. It's got to be Marc-Andre Fleury for me, winning the Vezina this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's equally fair. I also want to point out that whatever infographic I looked at earlier, where Vasi only lost 2 games outside of games against Florida, was completely incorrect. And whoever made that infographic is a spreader of lies. He lost 10 games this year, 4 to Florida.
Don't believe everything you see on the internet, Deej.
That's, yeah, I mean, 31-10-1.
You just read the headline.
That's not bad.
And you got called out. You only read the headline. You got to read the article. You're turning into your dad on Facebook. How's it feel?
It's an infographic. There is no article. I was just looking at the pictures.
The pictures wouldn't lie to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Delightful. We'll move on here as well. We've hit the halfway point of the awards. There were 6 that we were going to cover because, again, something like the Selke, whatever. Even though Bergeron's going to win it. The Calder, the trifecta here of controversial awards in that there are going to be pissed off fan bases that don't get their wish of their player being up there and nominated. When it comes to the Calder, again, you have that conversation of the goaltenders and the forwards. I don't think Swayman or Knight played enough games. When it comes to the other goalies, obviously, Ilya Sorokin is up there. Alex Nedeljkovic is very much up there. Kevin Lankinen was up there for a decent amount of time. I think he was very much surpassed by Nedeljkovic. For me at this stage, I think, if you were to have that conversation of what goalies are up there for the Rookie of the Year, it pretty much has to be Nedeljkovic because Drieger, not a rookie at this stage. So, I mean, if there is a goalie who is going to be in the conversation for the Calder, it is Nedeljkovic. Even over Sorokin, he is the guy. I don't remember if Igor Shesterkin was up there, still under rookie. I think he is technically still under the rookie deal.
Yeah, Shesterkin's still a rookie.
Yeah, it's clearly Nedeljkovic. And I get what some people's complaint might be of like, oh, well, think of the team he was on. The team was so good. At the end of the day, you still have to deliver. And Nedeljkovic did. And, he got the chance because someone like James Reimer couldn't deliver with that team. So, again, it might be held against him. Nedeljkovic would be up there for me when it comes to rookies. But I've said all year long who I thought was going to win the Calder. And I still think this. It is Kirill Kaprizov's to win. 54 games, 51 points. Robertson, 45 points in 51 games. My final three for the Vezina: Kaprizov, Robertson, Nedeljkovic. Kirill Kaprizov wins the Calder, as I stated at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think you're dead right with your final three. And for anybody that's looking at the goalies and saying, what about Lankinen? What about Vanacek, Shesterkin? Any of the goalies with rookie eligibility that actually earned what I would say is a starter's role this year, I cannot stress this enough. In 23 games played, Alex Nedeljkovic finished with a .932 in 23 games. That's an astounding number. That is some high quality goaltending from Alex Nedeljkovic. That said, I still think, it's Kirill Kaprizov. Congratulations. Done deal.
Yeah. Sometimes there are awards where you're like, oh, okay, there's a conversation to be had here. Yeah, there's no conversation to be had here. It's pretty straightforward. But then we move on to the final two awards that have nothing to do with the players. They have to do with the personnel. And we start off with the Jack Adams Coach of the Year. And again, Deej, this is another one where you can say there is a conversation to be had here. Now, it has been noted in The Athletic, an article by Pierre LeBrun, to say that the Hurricanes' Rod Brind'Amour is the frontrunner for the Jack Adams, according to an NHL GM poll. Joel Quenneville and Dean Evason of Minnesota round out the top three. And for the most part, I'd have to say that top three is probably pretty accurate. Again, there's the conversation of how the voting goes versus how it should go. Coach of the Year. Vegas. Top team in the West. There's an argument for coach and GM of the year for that matter. But obviously you look in the West, and who's the team that you weren't sure if they were going to make it? It's Minnesota. I think at the end of the day, you have that argument that Minnesota is more than likely, again, they were that team on the fringe. Were they going to make it over in Arizona? Was San Jose going to bounce back? Then in the Central, Tampa we knew was going to be pretty solid. Both Florida and Carolina deserve those shouts. They very much do, especially with Carolina jumping both, Tampa and Florida to win that division. I think in Pittsburgh, you have a shout there. Who expected the Pittsburgh Penguins to take the East? I don't think anybody did. And then in the North, you also had that conversation of should it be, should it go to the top team, of course, being Toronto when it comes to head coach and GM. Deej, how do you view it then? Because again, like I said, there's that conversation on how it's voted on versus how it should be voted on. I'm intrigued to know kind of who's up there for you for Coach of the Year.
So I thought about the Penguins for a little bit. I don't think Mike Sullivan made a big enough of a splash. Obviously this Penguins team was not doing well, say 20 games into the season, and they turned it around and they've been monsters. People are going to continually bring up Brind'Amour and Quenneville as the guys. But something, and I think it ends up going to one of them. I think it goes to Brind'Amour. I think Brind'Amour is the favorite right now. But I think something that needs to be said, and I can't even pronounce his name correctly, probably, but Dean Evason, the Minnesota coach, is a first-year coach. And being able to turn this franchise around with the addition of one player as a brand new coach, I think that might be a bigger feat than what Quenneville did with Florida or what Brind'Amour did with Carolina.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, and I think it's the reason why with Minnesota you have the argument not only for coach of the year but GM of the year, because there were those moves made by GM Bill Guerin where you're just like, what the hell exactly is going on here? And it worked. It worked out tremendously. So to stay with coach of the year for me, those top three, I'm perfectly fine with. You know, the idea of agreeing with the NHL GMs when it comes to Carolina, Florida, and Minnesota. Personally, I think I would give it to Quenneville over Brind'Amour because I think he's made more out of less compared to Carolina. You know, Minnesota, I think you deserve a shout for sure. But in terms of obviously what has been accomplished this season, Carolina and Florida are just that tiny bit ahead. I think, you know, you look at the Carolina roster and you look at that highly touted defense, and then you compare it to, say, some of the issues that have gone on with Florida. People expected Carolina to make the playoffs. They didn't expect Florida to make the playoffs, let alone for Florida to finish ahead of Tampa. I give it to Coach Q in Florida. I think based off of how this award is normally voted on, if you want to say Minnesota, Carolina, Florida are your top three, I think it goes to Florida based off of what they accomplished this year. And that's not just being said to appeal to the, you know, my co-host who is a Panthers fan. Like, just legitimately, you look at it, I think Coach Q deserves a hell of a lot of praise because is Minnesota able to do what they did without Dean Evason or Evison, whatever it is? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe they are with the roster changes that were made, you know, bringing in Cam Talbot, having Capo Kakkonen in the system, and bringing in Kaprizov. Is Carolina able to accomplish what they did without Brind'Amour? That's a tough sell because everyone knows Rod Brind'Amour has been instrumental in that team's evolution over the past 3 seasons. I don't think they are what they are, but I especially don't think Florida is what they are without Quenneville. I don't. I'm going to give it to Florida, but like Deej said, if you give it to Brind'Amour, I couldn't be upset or complain about that either. So, Deej, unless you have anything else to add, go ahead.
I did just want to point out, I saw this today, which is interesting because, you know, going into the season, Florida obviously highly underrated. And even as a Panthers fan, I mean, obviously, like, I'm happy Q's the coach, but I think he is pretty underrated in what he's done here. Since becoming the head coach of the Florida Panthers, Joel Quenneville this team has been 71, 40, and 13. And that's pretty big, all things considered, that this team was in shambles when they fired Bugner and brought him in.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair too, right? You talk about that importance of Brind'Amour to Carolina's turnaround. Quenneville, you could say, has been just as important towards getting this team to where they need to be. That said, we'll move on. Our final award that we're going to talk about here, it is GM of the Year. And again, it's a similar conversation where this award is often voted as what team overperformed. But I think, again, you look at, I guess, the definition of it and changes that were made. Vegas, how much credit do you give them for the acquisition of Pietrangelo and for the decision to keep Marc-Andre Fleury? Minnesota, again, a lot of changes to that roster from Bill Guerin. Number one, signing Kaprizov, you deserve credit for that. Bringing in Nick Bonino, as well as bringing in, say, on the goaltending side, of course, Cam Talbot as well. I think there's credit there. And in the West, I think I'd go with Minnesota as like my favorite. In the Central, I'd say out of all those teams, Florida probably deserves the most credit there with the moves that were made. The idea, I mean, number one, the Sam Bennett pickup might have sealed it for me in terms of that acquisition as well. You look at who they've added: Duclair, Gusev, Patrick Hornqvist, bringing in Carter Verhaeghe as well. Radko Gudas on defense. Of course, the trade now recently for Brandon Montour. Right now, I have Florida ahead of Minnesota in that regard. Out of the East Division teams, Pittsburgh, I don't think as much it was about acquisitions this season. It's just more about the general depth that they've been able to acquire to keep this team running. Boston, obviously, I think you have a legitimate argument for Don Sweeney based off of how he's crafted this team. Nick Ritchie, you can't give him too much credit for this season, perhaps. Maybe, if it were to be an award, cumulative over the past few years, but bringing in Taylor Hall, bringing in Craig Smith, certainly helped a lot. And obviously the risk of letting go of Chara, it's worked out. They've made the playoffs. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about Chara and the Bruins later on. And then in the North, I think you'd be looking at Toronto and Edmonton as two teams that are very much in the conversation. And you look at the moves that Toronto made throughout the year. Obviously the big deadline move like Foligno, but of course they brought in Galchenyuk, which ended up being great for them. The additions of Wayne Simmons and TJ Brody. Edmonton as well. Tyson Barrie, say what you want about him defensively, and there's certainly room to criticize, but that Tyson Barrie pickup has been huge, especially with them losing Clefbaum for the season. I think there are a lot of teams that get, some credit here. Indeed's trying to look at it. Like I said, if I were to kind of view this here just offhand, I feel like Toronto, Florida, Minnesota would be my final three. Again, would Toronto be at the top of the North without TJ Brody and Wayne Simmons and some of those other moves? I think there's at least a maybe there. Would Boston be a playoff team without Craig Smith and company? Conversation there. I think they still could have gotten over the hump over the Rangers. I don't know if Minnesota's a playoff team without the moves they've made. Getting Cam Talbot, getting Kirill Kaprizov to sign, bringing in someone like Nick Bonino. My GM of the year might be Bill Guerin in Minnesota. But, man, Florida there too. I might have to go Florida again here, to be honest. I don't want to just sit here and pander to the Panthers fan. But at the very least, even if I were to go Minnesota for GM of the year with Bill Guerin, the idea of what Bill Zito has done with the Panthers just this season, it's been an incredible turnaround. And I think at the very least he's in the top three.
Yeah, I feel like I would have to really stretch out some single player acquisitions to put anybody even in the realm of what Bill Zito has done he's been the GM of Florida for 8 months. I can't stress that enough. Or I guess he made his first trade 8 months ago. It's been a little bit longer than that, but he hasn't even been the GM for a year. And you look at what he's done and who he's added in that time frame. You look at him getting rid of Mike Matheson, who was a huge defensive liability here. He's improved his game a little bit in Pittsburgh for Hornqvist. You look at just there's not a single trade that Zito has lost on yet with the current, as of today. There's not a single trade he's lost on. You look at him signing Anthony Duclair, who put up 32 points in 43 games in exchange for $1 million. You look at Carter Verhaeghe, who he signed for 2 years. All of these signings, the Sam Bennett trade, it's nuts. Grabbing Gustav Forsling off waivers is an insane move in retrospect when all this is done. In terms of continually hitting it out of the park, move after move, I can't even find a smudge on his record, and he's turned this team into a monster.
Yeah, again, I don't think that can be discredited, and I think if you were to go maybe, again, not fair to look at it this way, but I think if you were to go someone else for Coach of the Year, I think Zito has to get GM of the Year. Like, there needs to be some sort of recognition of what the Florida Panthers have done here as of late. So with that, DJ, anything else to add here? Yeah. Or have we done it? Have we completed our kind of award recap here?
Well, there is one more trophy, and I want to talk about the race here and the extreme upset that occurred in this last week. But that is the Sean William Scott Trophy.
The real main event.
Leader.
I almost forgot.
The real main event. Now, this looked like it was going to go to Brendan Lemieux for a very long time. When he was in New York, he put up an insane amount of penalty minutes, and he's added very little to that total. And so over the last 3 weeks, there has been a extreme lead, a breakaway almost, by Max Domi, who accrued so many penalty minutes, he got himself benched for 2 games. Just going after guys, getting ejected, fighting. He was able to accrue 75, and then boom, out of nowhere from the figurative and in some cases literal top ropes, Tom Wilson has 86 penalty minutes and looks to be the winner of the inaugural Sean William Scott Trophy, much to the chagrin of, I'm sure, 98% of our listener base.
That is incredible. Out of nowhere. That's one thing I didn't even factor in, right? All those late penalty minutes from the from the Rangers and from the Caps. I mean, Brendan Smith, by the way. Brendan Lemieux, man, bumped down to 5th. I'll shout out Matthew Olivier as well. He's in 4th with 70. What the hell happened there? Not to mention Florida and Tampa went crazy, so you have like Ryan Lomberg and Pat Maroon up there now too. Goddamn. Although I will say...
Yeah, Sam Bennett in the top 20.
My favorite, though. Now, you could argue, right? This is similar to the points versus points per game argument. Tom Wilson has the most penalty minutes at 86 and 46. But Curtis Gabriel, 55 penalty minutes in 11 games. I think he might be the underdog favorite to actually get this award. It depends on what side of the argument you're on, Tom Wilson versus Curtis Gabriel. But Tom Wilson, for getting the most penalty minutes, looks like our untouchable Sean William Scott Award winner.
Yeah, I feel just because of this Curtis Gabriel incident, I feel like we should put in a rule on the fly that you had to have appeared in at least half of your team's games for the season. I don't know. I think that's reasonable. Because it's just too easy to get a 5, 10, and 2, show up in 3 or 4 games, call it a career, and walk away with the hardware. And I don't think that's what Sean William Scott stands for. I think Sean William Scott stands for, not letting your career just be relegated to being Stifler from American Pie. It's about trying to find new roles. It's about reading, breaking out a character, finding out where you can fit in no matter what, diversifying and trying to put years of teen comedy behind you.
I mean, lest we forget, though, the appearance of Sean William Scott in one of the greatest movies of all time, one of his first real attempts at trying to break out from the American Pie albatross that was dragging him down. And that was his appearance in the 2003 film The Rundown, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Christopher Walken, internationally known as Welcome to the Jungle. So, just felt like that's my favorite fact about Sean William Scott.
Well,
he said, I'm going to be in The Rundown and then say, screw that. In 2009, I'm going to star in Balls Out, Gary the Tennis Coach, and set myself back up until Goon.
Oh, yeah, where he actually played Gary in that movie. I don't know if you knew that.
I just learned that movie's a thing, for the love of God. Talk about something we have to do for the Patreon. We have to do. This is happening. Somehow, some way. on the Patreon sometime this year, Deej and I are going to watch Balls Out Gary the Tennis Coach. And we will live record our audio as a watch along for those of you on Patreon. Deej, we might even get the extra big and bouncy edition for the movie with the tagline, Small Balls, Big Ambition.
Well, yeah, I figure we'll reach out to Tom Wilson, tell him about the award he won, and see if he wants to watch this movie with us.
Could you imagine? And shout out to Goon, that's now 10 years, almost 10 years old. Goon came out almost 10 years ago. Good God. Good God.
My God.
Deej, before we move on here, though, to our kind of playoff preview, and admittedly, it could be a bit early for the playoff preview, but we're going to kind of work that into the division breakdown. I wanted to talk about this because somebody asked a question for the viewer segment, and I didn't know what they were referring to because I didn't see the news. And we'll kind of count this as a topic that we'd normally talk about on the bonus show, but again, admittedly, the bonus shows have been a little bit limited, mainly because, of course, of the home renovation I have going on. It might still be a little bit spotty for the rest of this month, but hopefully in June we work that out. The breaking news-ish of the Oakland A's possibly moving if their current local arena deal falls through. And somebody asked if Vegas would be the place for the A's to move. Is that the natural place? Deej, your thoughts. What do you think the future of the Oakland A's will be? Because, I mean, obviously we've seen it. The idea of a team moving from Oakland to Vegas isn't out of the realm of possibility. But baseball in Vegas, is that the way? I mean, think of, I guess, the money that could be made. I'm going to say I'd prefer them to not move, although for the love of God, they really, really do need a new stadium. But, I mean, I'd like to see that team stay, right? I mean, the Warriors moved. The Raiders moved. That city's in a bad way if the A's happen to move. I just want to know your thoughts.
So I don't think they moved to Vegas because one of the main impetuses of football teams moving is so that they don't have to have a baseball diamond in the middle of their field. The Oakland Raiders, famously the final team to have to play with baseball clay on their field. And so of the very little I've read about this, like I've just seen Reddit articles in passing, it seems the favorite is to move them to Portland, Oregon. I guess there is a demand for baseball there. I don't know. I don't know where they move to. I mean, obviously you don't want to see a market like Oakland be relegated to having to root for all of the San Francisco teams, which are notoriously, I mean, it's the most expensive island in the world, essentially. I go over to San Francisco, everything's going to cost $1 billion. And I think you end up accidentally pricing out your fan base by leaving them with just the Giants. So obviously I don't want to see them leave Oakland, but if they do, I would rather see them move to a place that doesn't necessarily have a professional baseball team, but has a market that could sustain one, like Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what happens there, at the very least. But we'll get back on track from that little segue. Let's move into our final talking point here for this show, and it is to discuss a bit of a playoff preview / our division breakdown. Now, I wanted to start off in the West. However, we still 100% don't know for sure who the number one seed in the West is going to be, which is why this is a little bit of a risk. Vegas right now has 2 points on Colorado. They have 1 game left. Colorado has 2. Vegas here, if I'm not mistaken, plays, and actually here, let me double check here. They do play San Jose, whereas Colorado plays the LA Kings for their last 2 games. Deej, regardless, we've talked about Vegas a lot in this show. When it comes to the idea of, say, if it's Vegas or St. Louis, and look, St. Louis, like I said, there is a chance that the Blues can go on a run here. I mean, like I said, I know it hasn't been this like high-flying, phenomenal season for them like a lot of Blues fans were hoping for, but they still have some bright spots. Like David Perron's almost a point-per-game player this year. There are some bright spots. But whether or not it's Vegas versus St. Louis or Colorado against St. Louis, no doubt the higher seed is the favorite to move on. I mean, again, talking about whether or not it would be a sweep or not, I don't know. But I think we're both in agreement. Vegas or Colorado, no matter who takes that one seed, they're probably beating the Blues, barring, they're at least the favorites, right? You never know how a series is going to play out, the styles meshing and all that. But the Blues are underdogs in the first round no matter what.
Yeah. I think either of these teams are the favorite against the Blues. But there is something here that I think is worth mentioning, and that I find fascinating. So I don't know the exact way to phrase this, but in what I will call the modern era of the NHL, ignoring relocations, obviously, the only modern expansion team to win a President's Trophy is the Nashville Predators. And we might see the Vegas Golden Knights do this in 4 years.
Which is absolutely absurd. But again, the reason why...
making the playoffs is one thing, but a President's Trophy,
right?
That's crazy.
Right. Well, I mean, too, but the detractors will bring up, well, they had such a head start over the other teams, and then that'll spurn into the Vegas shouldn't have their expansion draft protection anymore and all that salty bullshit set of complaints that people have. But I mean, no, it's incredible what Vegas has been able to pull off. That said, if this matchup were to go the other way, like I said, if it's Vegas, St. Louis, Colorado, St. Louis, you're favoriting the higher seed. I'm not completely ruling out the Blues' opportunity at being able to pull off a first-round upset. I mean, again, being a Bruins fan, seeing what the Blues have done in the past, I refuse to doubt them. I've said that all season long. But the middle matchup here, so to speak, if it's Colorado, Minnesota, or Vegas, Minnesota, we talked about this last week, Deej. Minnesota, for the most part, has had Vegas's number. So it makes you wonder about this matchup, and I'm intrigued to get your opinion here. If it's Colorado, Minnesota, who do you go with? And if it's Vegas, Minnesota, knowing that Minnesota's done well against the Golden Knights this year, who do you go with? Again, are you taking the higher seed no matter what?
That's a great question. I think if it's Colorado, I take Colorado. If it's Vegas, I take Minnesota. And I believe Vegas is a better hockey team, but sometimes teams just have teams' numbers.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the direction I'm leaning towards too, right? Like, you want to say, like, obviously, naturally, with a situation like this heading into the playoffs, you always want to say, well, the better team is probably going to win. Like you said, sometimes teams just have the other squad's numbers, but then obviously you get into the playoffs too, and crazy stuff can happen, right? You never quite know how it's going to play out. So I think I agree. Like, if I had to bet, I think Colorado takes out Minnesota, but I think Minnesota could upset Vegas. But for the most part, I think the way it lines up, I think Vegas will stay at 1, Colorado at 2, and I think we get that ridiculous second round matchup of Vegas and Colorado, barring, something like Colorado falling apart with a massive amount of injuries again.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm excited to see this kind of gel. It could be as much as 3 days before we actually know the matchups here in this division, just with the way things are scheduled. And I hope it's Minnesota Vegas, because I would like to do a deep dive into why like I didn't really sit down and watch an entire Vegas versus Minnesota game this year. And I'd like to, if that ends up being the matchup, I wouldn't mind doing a deep dive into why Minnesota seemed to have Vegas's number. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't say I wouldn't be looking forward to, that matchup regardless. But aside from that, then elsewhere in the West, just to quickly touch up upon it, for the Arizona Coyotes, Rick Tocchet's officially out as the head coach. We kind of talked about this before, who the favorite is for that job. I mean, it appears as though Armstrong would have his favorite. I think it was Greg DeVries, former NHL defenseman, that was kind of in the running there. Obviously, people are wondering if it's Tortorella. With Bill Zito and his coaching or his leadership style as GM, you'd think the coaching style would fit along with that. So we'll see what happens there. But as well, Phil Kessel, 900 points, also becomes the 5th player in NHL history to play in 900 consecutive games. So a shout out there to one Phil the Thrill. Arizona, going to be one of the more interesting off seasons, I think, to look at. We've talked about it. The majority of that defense core on expiring contracts. They don't have their 1st and 3rd round picks this year. I'm intrigued to see what the Coyotes do, especially when 2 out of the 3 teams below them, coincidentally all the California teams, but LA and Anaheim, potentially on the up as soon as next year with some of the younger players that they have. I mean, obviously, Los Angeles, there was a point not all that long ago, Deej, where we thought, like, man, if they keep this up, they might make it. Obviously, San Jose is their own special kind of disaster, and so is Anaheim for that matter. It's the, as you would suspect in a shortened season, but it's the worst point total in team history with just 43. As well, they have finished the year with the worst power play in a single season in NHL history, 9% conversion rate on Anaheim's power play this year. So it was a special kind of bad, but I don't view that as an overwhelming negative for the Ducks. You talk about the young players they already have in that system. They're going to get another high draft pick this year. I think it's a good thing overall for the Ducks at this stage. So just kind of how the West has played out. Deej, any thoughts before we move on to the Central?
No, I think you hit it all. Yeah, let's move on to the Central, where the matchups are locked in place.
Yes.
The whole Central, everybody's finished their season. So
which is crazy given Dallas's postponement to the beginning of their season due to COVID. But quickly then, we'll move in to the battle of 1v4. It is Carolina, and it's time for a phone call. It is Carolina against Nashville. Already talked about Nashville quite a bit here in terms of the importance that UC Soros had. Deej, you talked about it. If Florida were to have ended up playing Nashville, you were concerned about UC Soros' ability to steal that series. Do you have that same fear if you were a fan of Carolina in his ability to do that? Because on paper, obviously, the Carolina Hurricanes are very much favorites here. You're talking about a Nashville team, only made it in by 4 points. Not the most overwhelmingly dominant season, although, again, we talked about it, really good form in the back half. They won 7 of their last 10 games. I mean, is there anything outside of a puncher's chance for Nashville here, or do you think Carolina moves on as they overwhelmingly should?
Well, I mean, you can say they were resting players or they took time off or whatever. But I mean, Nashville just beat Carolina twice in a row. And then we're only able to get 1 goal in those 2 games. They faced UC Soros, he got 20 saves on 21 shots. And then in the next game, Pekka Rinne put up a 5-0 shutout against Carolina. And you can say that they were resting or whatever. But I don't see a world where you go in and sandbag it against the team that you are about to play a series of hard-fought, rough, emotional games against. I don't see how you don't try to set a tone. So if I'm Carolina, I'm worried. The Predators just took 2 games and absolutely shut our offense down.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing for me with Carolina as well is the expectations are so high at this stage. And I can't say that, we're waiting for them to round the corner, because they're not all that removed from a conference final in 2019, right? So you look at, I mean, I guess that conversation of, well, when are they going to make the jump? It's like they've made it, but you're waiting for them to essentially get to a cup final. There's a lot of pressure on them at this stage to get this done. And a team like Nashville that's probably going to view this as, we got nothing to lose. Let's just go for it. Like, we've been on this great run. I think Carolina, I mean, very much they're the favorites, but in talking about a team that could pull off an upset, I think Nashville could potentially do it. I mean, it wouldn't, certainly wouldn't be the first time we've seen a team sneak into the playoffs and, make something happen. So I'm very intrigued by this particular matchup. Again, if I had to bet, am I betting on Carolina? Yes. Am I betting the house on Carolina, thinking that, there's no way that Nashville can win this? Like, no, there's a way Nashville could pull this off. I could see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, every single year there are upsets in the NHL playoffs. And I think this could very well be one of them. I think this has all the makings of an upset.
Yeah, I mean, again, I very much agree. And we'll move on then to our second matchup. It's amazing, because I genuinely think all these matchups are extremely interesting to watch. The Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Out of nowhere, incredibly heated if it wasn't already, with some fisticuffs over the past couple of days. Now, for Florida, I mean, again, there was 136 penalty minutes when they beat Tampa 5-1 in the penultimate game of the season, and there was some more physicality, of course, in the final game. We've talked about the Panthers a lot, obviously, with DeJ being a Panthers fan, and we mentioned him earlier. Some of the acquisitions that they made before the season, like Hornqvist and Gudis, and then some of the other moves. Sam Bennett had put up the most points of any Panther in team history in his first 10 games with the team. He passed Pavel Bure in that regard. When it comes to this matchup, outright, I am taking the Florida Panthers, and I will tell you why. Number one, yes, Andrei Vasilevsky is phenomenal, but he has struggled against Florida this season at times. And this was a stat. This might be from the penultimate game of the season or the final. And it was that Andrei Vasilevsky gave up 4 goals through 2 periods last night. It's only the 3rd time that has happened to him in his last 73 games. All 3 incidents were against the Florida Panthers. We talked about teams that might have the other team's number. It appears as though Florida might have that edge. On top of that, and this is the X factor for me, Victor Hedman is reportedly injured and has an injury that will require surgery in the offseason. Tougie, so many guys played through injuries in the playoffs. The punctured lung, Patrice Bergeron, I am aware. DeJ, do you recall what happened the last time the Tampa Bay Lightning entered the playoffs and it was known that Victor Hedman wasn't 100%?
They got bounced.
They got bounced. I don't recall hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Hedman was injured last year. But very notably, it was known that Victor Hedman was hurt in that Columbus series, and they got trounced. This team, against the Panthers squad that might have their number, against, and I'm going to get called a Panthers fan at this point. I'm biased against the Lightning. Oh, you just hate the Lightning because of the mask. No, I have praised Tampa all season long. I said Tampa would beat Philadelphia in the Stanley Cup final at the beginning of the season. I said Tampa would go back-to-back. So you can take all your bias talk and shove it up your ass. I legitimately think that the Panthers have their number, and Victor Hedman being hurt scares the crap out of me, and I'm not even a fan of the Lightning. If you want to talk about that first round upset, and it's a little bit disrespectful to the Panthers because they finished 4 points ahead of the Lightning. If you want to talk about the potential for an upset, Hedman, not 100%. Stamkos and Kucherov, are they both going to play? Are they both 100%? I think there are a lot of questions now surrounding this Lightning squad, especially after a tough cup run last year, where if they're not fully healthy, they're facing a very good Panthers team at this stage who won 8 of their last 10 and 6 in a row heading into the playoffs. I think that upset that you talked about, I think it could be the Panthers over the Lightning.
So I talked a little bit in the Carolina-Nashville matchup preview about setting a tone, right? When you are playing a team twice to end the season that you're going to play in the playoffs. So going into these final 2 regular season games, Tampa Bay just had to pick up 2 points. Any style, doesn't matter. Could be 2 loser points, anything. And they would have gotten home ice advantage, whatever, home ice advantage. But the subtext to that home ice advantage is you get to change your lines second. The other team has to change their lines first. You can match lines for faceoffs if you are the home team. In those 2 games where Tampa only had to pick up 2 points, they were outscored 9-1. They did not show up. They did not care. They got obliterated. Everybody on the internet was, oh, well, they're down Hedman. They're down Stamkos. They're down Kucherov. The Panthers played the second game without Aaron Ekblad, without Sam Bennett, without Jonathan Huberdeau, without Patrick Hornquist, with their backup goalie, Chris Drieger. Tampa Bay got absolutely embarrassed on the ice both times. And that is the attitude they are carrying into this playoff series. Even if I wasn't a Panthers fan, I would sit there and I would say, how do you play those 2 games and let this team have your number? This is extremely high level pro hockey. There is no being a pool shark of the playoffs where you act like you are a terrible team and then show up completely different in the playoffs. That's not a thing at this level of hockey. So I don't know what's going to happen in this series, but if Tampa beats Florida, it will take a Disney movie-esque miracle turnaround in that locker room and the attitude they're bringing into this series.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that's either of us have necessarily had unreasonable takes here. I mean, I'm sure, obviously diehard Lightning fans will disagree, and again, whatever, but 2 very interesting matchups where could I see Florida and Nashville playing in the second round? Yes. Could I see both Florida and Nashville getting just destroyed? Yes. Because the Central is just in general, these playoff matchups. I mean, there have been people talking about like, hey, should these divisions stay the same? I mean, they've at least resulted in some very interesting playoff matchups. So I'm intrigued for that reason at the very least. Aside from that, in this particular division, just a couple of other quick talking points. For the Chicago Blackhawks, it's worth noting, a shout out to Alex DeBrincat hitting 30 goals this season, which is great. And again, for Hawks fans, there's no reason to not be confident moving forward. Same for Red Wings fans as well. Jakub Vrana finished with 11 points in 11 games. That's 8 goals and 3 assists with the Red Wings after the Mantha trade, which again has worked out well for them. And in terms of that young core, along with Vrana, who's mid-20s, Joe Veleno scored his first goal, and Moritz Seider was seen in the aftermath of the SHL final. He ended up losing. Rogel ended up losing that final, but at 19, 20 years old, seen, consoling other teammates after the loss, like the leadership there. That Moritz Seider pick is going to be one of the more infamous ones in history, I think, Deej, where again, their instant reactions, what the hell is Yzerman doing? And already it looks like he knocked it out of the park. So, talking about some of these teams that didn't make it, there is reason to be optimistic, unless you're a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets, again, or a fan of the Blue Jackets. I mean, yes, Torts is gone. Still some question marks about line A. Some question marks in goal, where Elvis Merzlikins admitted, this was from Mark Scheig, I'm not sure, but said that, he didn't think it's the best idea to have he and Korpisalo sharing the net, considering they're both number one goalies, which, I mean, obviously for the Blue Jackets, it's going to be like, hey, we have two number one goalies, but apparently the players weren't that happy about it. So, yeah, pretty much I think for every team in this makeshift Central Division, there's hope and optimism, especially for the 4 teams still in it. But for the future as well, unless you're Columbus. So, sorry, Blue Jackets fans. Deej, anything else to add before we move on to the East?
No. I think you summed up the Central quite well.
All right, so let's move on.
So to the East,
where the
matchups are also set.
The matchups are also set, thankfully. Number 1, Pittsburgh against the New York Islanders. I am excited for this series because how could you not be? Deej, it was not all that long ago that we saw this first round matchup. I mentioned the 2019 playoffs a lot today. 2019, the Islanders sweep the Penguins, and people are saying the Penguins are cooked. They are done. They win this division here. I don't really know how this is going to play out because, again, the obvious thing to do is to pick the favorites. And for the Penguins right now, it's been an incredible season. They won 8 of their last 10, 3 in a row heading into the playoffs. It's the first time they finished ahead of the Capitals in division standings since 2014. And really the theme to their season has been, no matter how many injuries, they keep going. Malkin's down, Matheson's down. They lose this forward, they lose this defenseman. People step up. They end up playing Max Lagacé in goal, and he gets a shutout in his first game with the Penguins. Somehow, some way, this machine just keeps moving forward, no matter how many bolts and belts and everything else just seem to fall off of it. Somehow it keeps the car going. And they play an Islanders team that has arguably the best coach in the league, one of the best goaltenders in the league, but they struggled down the stretch, winning just 3 of their last 10 games. Indeed, you talk about how big of a factor momentum is heading into the playoffs. It's a tough call. It's a tough call. The Penguins are certainly the favorites. They're my pick to win this, but there is that X factor in saying, well, the Islanders have done it before. They're not a bad team. They have that chippiness to them as well. Shout out to Leo Komarov, who butt-ended David Pastrnak last night for no goddamn reason. I'm intrigued by this matchup. Deej, admittedly, and I've said this, there is not a single playoff matchup I'm not intrigued by. I think every series is must-watch hockey. I don't think there's one series where you say, this really isn't all that interesting. I think we are set for one of the most, on paper, incredible playoff runs that we've seen in our lifetime in terms of the matchups that are here. How do you see Pittsburgh versus New York going?
So Pittsburgh's the type of team that they are going to have 2019 in the forefront of their mind going into this series. And you mentioned momentum, and I think that's important to bring up, is how the Islanders have not only fallen apart, but over their they have lost 5 in a row to win the series, including overtime losses. They lost 2 to Buffalo, 2 to New Jersey, and then they lost in overtime to Boston to finish out their season.
I think they beat New Jersey in one of those games, just to correct you. Indeed, they beat New Jersey 5-1.
Yes, they did.
So they lost 4 out of their last 5, at least. So to your point,
but does it really count? It's New Jersey.
Fair.
So so this team was on top of this division at one point, and over the back half of this season has just kind of meandered, is a good word, in this East division. And I think it's apparent now that you can't replace Anders Lee with two guys that are not elite forwards. They are good players. They are role players coming off of New Jersey. And you just can't replace Anders Lee on this team. And you can play Barry Trotz hockey all you want. If you are struggling to put the puck in the net, which this team seems to do every other night, you're not going to beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. Especially this incarnation of the Pittsburgh Penguins that can score accidentally if they want to. This incarnation of the Pittsburgh Penguins knows how to put teams down. In Pittsburgh's final 5 games, they scored, let me do some math here, 26 goals in their final 5 games of the season. Talk about setting a tone. I'm sorry, not 26. They scored, I'm off by 5. They scored 21 in their final 5. That's still setting a tone.
Yeah, fair.
That is coming into this not tempering your play. That is continuing to play your game. That is not taking a day off. That is not losing a step. That is thinking about 2019 as if it is the only thing that matters to you.
Like I said, I'm intrigued. I still think Pittsburgh, on paper, you have to choose them. But could this go any number of ways? I mean, yeah, I could see either side winning this one because, again, that idea of someone having their number, but has Pittsburgh kind of reversed that mindset? Do the Islanders necessarily have their number at this stage? That is the question. The other matchup in the Mass Mutual East Division. Deej, do you recall a tweet of mine and an Instagram post from this past December?
No.
That's okay. Some people might, with a little bit more detail. I received a jersey I was tempted to buy for a long time. Finally got a good deal on one. I bought a Zdeno Chara Winter Classic jersey. And that particular picture and tweet went viral because the day I got that in the mail, and no, folks, that wasn't scripted. I have the receipts. The day I got that in the mail, Zdeno Chara left the Boston Bruins and signed with the Washington Capitals. And I thought I was better prepared for that in the aftermath of Tom Brady leaving. And I'm like, oh, God. It's like, okay, well, I've seen it happen once. It's okay. If you had told me that they would then meet Chara in the playoffs, like that's the thing for me, is the entire decision to let Chara walk, good move, bad move, hinges on what happens in this series, especially if it's a close series and Washington were to win. You were to say, what if the Bruins had kept Chara? Because Chara has been very much a useful defenseman for the Caps this year, and I still think could have been a useful defenseman for the Bruins. But as I've mentioned on this show, I don't disagree with the idea of playing those younger defensemen and saying, well, we have to see what the hell we have with these guys. We have to know what we have from Clifton, from Vakanainen, from Zaboral, from Lozon. So I get it. For me, it's potentially worst case scenario for that reason. But this series, out of all the series with the potential for that chippiness, I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. Is you have the Caps with Tom Wilson, and on the flip side for the Bruins, you have, your bigger guys like Charlie Coyle. You have the feistiness of a Jake DeBrusk. Will Trent Frederick, one of the top penalty minute getters, even as a young player, will he be in the lineup? The Bruins obviously have Marchand, Nick Ritchie. Defensively, they have someone like Kevin Miller, who, if you were to say, well, who are the guys you don't, if you had to fight somebody, who would you least want to fight? I might want to fight Kevin Miller less than someone like Ryan Reeves. That guy has a right hand from hell that he unleashed on Tage Thompson, as I'll bring that up again. This might be, I mean, Deej, there are some close competitive first round matchups. This might be the closest. I mean, this is a complete toss up. And the idea, the theory of first round matchup, two cup caliber teams kill each other and are easy pickings for whoever they meet in round two, that could very well come to fruition here. I would not be surprised to see Pittsburgh or New York beat whoever comes out of this series in the second round. Because the thought is this is going to be a physical bloodbath between these two. I don't know. Literally, the other series, I'm like, well, I feel like this team could win, but maybe the upset. I have no idea. Obviously, I'm backing my team to be able to win this. I have no idea who wins this series. It is as much of a 50-50 toss-up as I think you can get.
Something interesting I want to point out. So much like the Carolina-Nashville series and the Tampa-Florida series, these two teams are playing, I believe the puck drops in 5 minutes as we are recording this. What is interesting is tonight, Boston are resting their stars. The Washington Capitals are not.
Yes.
So, you got to wonder, do the Capitals think like I do, where it's no days off, set a tone here, versus the Bruins who are taking a day off? I find that interesting. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to that, but it's definitely two conflicting ideologies. And I think, on paper, I think Washington's the better hockey team. That said, I don't think this is a true test of these ideologies of, do you rest your stars before the playoffs? Do you play them, keep them warm, especially when they're about to be playing these same players? But I think 3 games into this series, me and you might revisit this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, the idea of resting, I don't hate it for the Bruins because of how many wars these guys have been through. And the idea of, especially letting someone like Patrice Bergeron sit out. The Bruins just announced their lines. Their top line tonight is Jake DeBrusk, Curtis Lazar, and Chris Wagner. They have Zach Senyshyn in the lineup, also known as not Matt Barzal. I mean, yeah, I'm intrigued to see the mentality of this, right? Like you said, the idea, because it's, I don't know if it was official, but I think the first game is on Saturday. I mean, again, there's just not too much I can say without kind of going in circles and reiterating certain points. I have no idea how this series is going to go, but I am anxiously awaiting it. That said, not too much else to talk about in the East Division with the other teams at this stage. Unless you have anything else to add, Deej, let's move on to the North as we look to wrap up this particular show.
Oh, yeah.
So we're good to move on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, maybe Boston's perspective on this is because the Stanley Cup playoffs are so much about your third and fourth lines and consistency and your grinders. I mean, how many third liners whose names are forever etched into your memory in Doc Emmerich's voice because of how they performed in the Stanley Cup playoffs? Maybe the Bruins are looking at this and they're saying, well, let's take our third and fourth liners and see how they play against this team. Let's see who are the guys we can count on. Maybe that's how they're looking at it.
I don't disagree with that, because the thought was post deadline, DeBrusk, Coyle, and it wasn't Craig Smith that they were trying to get work in that sense. And here's the issue: it didn't work, which is why it's not coming to mind. But the idea of DeBrusk, Coyle, Ritchie as the third line, and it just hasn't clicked, because, like I said, Coyle's not having the best season. So I do think there's a bit of a toss up in that bottom sixth, in the bottom six, where some guys could still be playing for their spots. And to say, hey, if you impress us here against Washington, you might get a chance. So I think there is something I think there is something to that. I'll say that. Again, we'll move on to the North, the Scotia, and we start off with a toss-up here because we don't yet know the matchup between 1 and 4. We do know that Toronto is the number 1 seed. And as well for the Leafs, I'm sure tomorrow's game against Ottawa will be a bit of a just kind of get it over and done with. Freddie Anderson gets his first game time since March 19th. So interesting to see him back in. Still don't think he's their starter for the playoffs, of course. But again, it's the idea of Toronto against Montreal or Toronto against Winnipeg. And obviously, there's a bit of an elephant in the room here between those two teams, and that is that neither Winnipeg or Montreal are in good form. Montreal's won 4 of their last 10. Winnipeg, we talked about limping into the playoffs, Deej. Winnipeg has 1 win in their last 10 games. I talked about it for the Jets earlier in the show, or in the past few weeks, that they need to escape Edmonton because Connor McDavid has feasted on the Jets this season. At this point for Winnipeg, I don't think it matters. I think the injuries are too much. The momentum's not there. I think Montreal is going to jump them. The Jets have 2 games left on 59 points. The Habs play their final game. They are 1 point behind the Jets. The Habs play their final game tomorrow against Edmonton, so maybe they don't jump them. For Winnipeg, just flat out, I don't care if it's Toronto. I don't care if it's Edmonton. The Jets aren't winning in round 1. There's just no way. So the idea then of Winnipeg, Montreal against Toronto, what do you think happens there? And is that a more intriguing series than Edmonton and Montreal?
So I wish I could sit here and tell you what the probable matchups are, regardless of that question. I think Edmonton, Winnipeg. So I want Toronto, Montreal. I think that's the most intriguing series. You get 2 original 6 teams, haven't met in the playoffs in 100,000 years.
Yeah.
You get a series of hockey games that could legitimately lead to a new country being part of North America in a great Quebec secession. And I really want that, but we have a nursery rhyme here in South Florida that we teach our children from the moment they can talk, and I think it applies here more than ever. And that rhyme is JETS, suck, suck, suck. And I don't know how this team sucks that bad. Did you know that amongst all goalies, and of course there's a whole bunch of other factors related in the stat, don't take it as it is on face value, but it's still worth mentioning. Did you know that Connor Helbig has let in more goals than any other goalie in the NHL this year?
No, I did not. That's shocking, to be honest, at face value. Wow. Jeez.
I mean, obviously he's played significantly more ice time than other goalies, but it's still such a shocking statistic to see. This team is completely fallen apart. Somebody said it on NHL radio this week. When's the last time you saw 2 teams lose a trade? And I think we saw it here with Winnipeg and Columbus. I don't know what you do. I don't know how you go 1-9. Minus that 1 win, it's a 56-game season. 20% of your season has been a losing streak with a single breath of fresh air in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go to the Stanley Cup playoffs with that hanging over your head? You need to fire your coach and hire Bombay, because that's the only way I would believe this team makes it out of the first round.
Well, I mean, I can't disagree, right? And I mean, you talk about it too, like the injury to Nikolai Ehlers is probably just the start at this stage. There's just so much wrong with this team that I had faith in the Jets to make the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken. Feel free to go back to our first show. Had faith in the Jets to make the playoffs. there is no way this ends up well for them. And you talk about the idea of a potential sweep in round one. I don't care if it's Toronto. I don't care if it's Edmonton. I have no faith in Winnipeg at this stage. So that said, you said, when's the last time two teams lost a trade? My argument, Shea Weber for PK Subban, because neither team has certainly won. Nashville got to a cup final with PK, didn't win, and Montreal's gotten nowhere with Shea Weber. So that's my response to that. But yeah, I mean, again, if it's Toronto, Winnipeg, I definitely side with Toronto. If it's Toronto, Montreal, does Montreal have a chance here? Obviously. But Toronto is the better hockey team. So I think for Montreal, it's a bit more of a puncher's chance at beating the Leafs. I think the Leafs move on to round two no matter what. That said, we look at Edmonton. First and foremost, again, if it's Winnipeg, Edmonton moves on. If it's Montreal, I still think Edmonton moves on. And again, we talked about Mike Smith, but Deej, I have 1,000 stats here for Connor McDavid, and we've buried the lead a little bit. Connor McDavid did hit 100 points, because of course he did. He was the first player to hit 100 points in 53 games or less since 95-96. There is a very good chance that the majority of our audience was not alive the last time this happened in an NHL season. Connor McDavid records his 17th game with 3+ points this season. That's the second most in a single season since 05-06. And the 18 players, or the players with 18 3-point games, all did it in an 82-game season. Connor McDavid, on April 17th, needed 31 points in 14 games to hit 100. He did it with 3 games remaining. He needed 31 points in 14 games. He got 31 points in 11. Connor McDavid has more games with 3+ points this season than games with 0 points. Connor McDavid has more assists than the next highest scoring Oiler has points. If McDavid had 0 goals, he would lead the NHL in points. It is one of the best seasons in NHL history, Deej.
And let me further underline your point, because people are like, I don't think people do enough research here and investigate how ridiculous this is. 95-96, when Mario Lemieux put up those numbers, when he put up the 100 points, do you know that year the Vezina winner was Washington Capitals' Jim Carey, who won the Vezina with a 893?
The net detective. Bruins legend. An 893 save percentage, and he won.
893 won the Vezina. Connor McDavid is doing this against Jack Campbell, who I've heard is the greatest goalie to ever touch NHL ice. He's doing this against Carey Price, who I've heard is the greatest goalie to ever touch NHL ice.
God, it's just unreal. And again, I think we could wax poetic about the greatness of Connor McDavid. To that point, again, DJ, I think you're in agreement.
Or how Mario Lemieux's stats are inflated.
Yes. The longest of cons. If no matter what, Winnipeg's out. If they play Edmonton, they're out. But you said it, right? In terms of Toronto, Montreal, we have your opinion there. If Edmonton plays Montreal, where do you go? Is it still siding with Edmonton, or Montreal just a few steps away, or could you see the Habs pulling off that win?
There is a slim chance that Connor McDavid gets injured. And that's how I can see, that's the only way I see Montreal or Winnipeg getting past Edmonton. You know, I said earlier, there's always upsets in the NHL. There is nothing I want more this year for hockey than the North Division to be Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl versus Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews. Winner gets a 25% shot at winning the cup after presumably an egregiously long stay in quarantine. I want that matchup. America wants that matchup. I hope Canada wants that matchup. 3/4 of Canada wants that matchup. And it's going to be the greatest TV ever.
I mean,
in saying that,
go ahead.
I'm looking forward to seeing Winnipeg Montreal for the North Division,
right?
Just because I put that out there in the world, how badly I want to see that. It's all going to go up in flames.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? There's such good odds that Toronto, Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, that happens. Both of them could happen, which means they probably won't at that stage. So Winnipeg completely ruling them out. Montreal, not so much. Aside from that, in the division, I'll mention for Ottawa, congratulations to one Tim Stützle, who scored his first NHL hat trick at 19 years old, the youngest player with a hat trick in Sens history. And the Vancouver Canucks. We have talked about this disaster of a season for them a ton. This was from Thomas Drance. The Canucks, in their 51-year history, had never missed the playoffs 5 times in a 6-season span. This season was a disaster. This team is arguably a disaster. I mean, there's a lot of questions in terms of how they get it back on track. And yes, I mean, is it unfair to call them a disaster after they did what they did in the bubble last year? Maybe it is. But whether it be the coaching, the moves, the ins and the outs that they had happened to make, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of questions surrounding the Vancouver Canucks. But overall, to bring it back to the point of the playoffs, Deej, God damn it, I just can't wait for this to start. It's going to be unreal.
Yeah, 100%. Can't wait for these matchups to get decided. By our Friday episode, we'll be able to kind of say, okay, here's what's happening. That bracket will be open. I can't wait. Winner will get something. Promise it'll be cool, so please enter. I mean, there's the off season begins for some of you today. Highly recommend jumping on a bandwagon. I know the bandwagon is usually used in a derogatory way, but you will have so much more fun watching the playoffs if you can tie yourself emotionally to a team. Jump on a bandwagon, use that bandwagon to meet new people. And if you're meeting new people, you know what you're going to want to do? You're going to want to use code Tougie. That's right, TOUGIE for 20% off at manscaped.com. Manscaped, your balls will thank you. Once again, that's code Tougie, TOUGIE. We can't thank them enough. We have a real sponsor. They sent us real products, and those products do real work. Tougie, anything to add?
Your balls will thank you. Thank you all very much. We will see you later on this week. Good day.
This has been Tougie's Take. Tougie's Take is a DJ Audio podcast. DJ Audio, you're listening to it. See y'all on Friday.